South India, a lush, vibrant land, with a sinuous rhythm like no other. Its life beats meander with the living, the non-living, and even the dead, in a wonderful cosmic communion. Think South India. Think temples, built in stone. The silent sentinels bear a stoic testimony to the past, telling their own stories, if you care to listen. The stories are so old, some true, some not so true, that the sands of time have sometimes blunted, sometimes sharpened the truth. Light merges into shade, and vice versa. Over time, who cares? Legends are lost in a whirlpool of time, and found again on the banks of memory, generation after generation, embellished, sometimes eroded, by imagination. We tell you one such story, a story of long ago, a curse upon a king and his kingdom. But you have to listen. Listen carefully. Can you hear the whispers? In the beginning of the 17th century AD, the Vijayanagara Empire ruled the majority of southern India. Tirumala II, also called Srirangaraya, viceroy of the Vijayanagara Empire, controlled his territory from Srirangapatnam, an island on the river Kaveri. Raja Wudiyar, a young and ambitious feudatory of the nearby Mysore province, challenged the viceroy. Battles ensued. Slowly but decisively, Raja Wudiyar extended his domain of control over the viceroy's territories. Eventually, in 1610, Tirumala II relinquished the viceroy's throne to Raja Wudiyar and retired to Malingi, a village on the banks of the river Kaveri, across from the ancient city of Talakad. It is here that history is interrupted by a mysterious incident, only told as a legend, that haunts this land. On his retirement to Malingi, Tirumala II was accompanied by his wife Alamelama, who brought with her the jewels that she would lend to adorn the goddess at the temple of Lord Vishnu in Srirangapatnam. Raja Wudiyar, believing the precious jewels rightfully belonged to the temple, sent his soldiers to bring back the jewels from Alamelama. When confronted by the soldiers at Malingi, Alamelama surrendered only a nose ring made from a giant pearl. Enraged and worn down by decades of defeat upon her family, she uttered words that would seal the fate of a land and its rulers for centuries to come. She cursed Raja Wudiyar of Mysore.
Talakadu maradagali, Malangi maduvagali, Mysuru doregalu makkalillade hogali.
She then plunged into the dark waters of the Kaveri, taking the precious jewels with her, never to be seen again. "400 years later, we find ourselves on the waters of the Kaveri. The sound of our motorboat unsettling the pervasive calm. Our reason for being here was clear: to see for ourselves the consequences of Alamelama's curse. Had Talakad succumbed to sand? Had Malingi become a whirlpool? And had the Wodiyas, erstwhile rulers of Mysore, actually failed to beget sons?
ತಲಕಾಡು ಮರಳಾಗಲಿ.
We began our search from present-day Talakad, situated on the northern bank of the river Kaveri. A little further from here lay an area of about 10 square kilometers covered by sand dunes. Buried under the sand is the ancient city of Talakad. A city that was once upon a time the capital of great empires. The sand at Talakad seemed to appear out of nowhere. We saw temples scattered across the landscape, unearthed from beneath the dunes. Even today, the sand threatens to submerge them, an eerie reminder of what happened to the ancient city centuries ago. We were told that there are many more temples at Talakad, perhaps 30, that lie buried under this sea of sand. Could all this have happened because of Alamelama? Archaeological findings have actually fixed the sand formation to about the same time as the legend, 1600 AD. Professor Krishnamurthy from the University of Mysore, who was part of an excavation project at Talakad, described some of the findings.
See, in the course of the excavation at the south-western corner of Talakad township, we encountered a very huge long wall, remains of a long wall. It is meant to protect the buildings that were existing at that particular point. It was not a fort wall, definitely. It was not even an enclosure wall, because it is incomplete. So it must have been built for a different purpose. Sand was the only threat, movement of sand was the only threat that the people faced at that time. So they built in a hurry a huge screen wall. See, the wall can be dated to post 17th century AD. We have got archaeological, in the sense stratigraphical evidence from the trench that after sand started falling over the township, this wall has been raised. In the formation of sand dunes, a definite evidence, clinching evidence, comes from another trench, where we have in the section a thin layer of fine airborne sand, and above that we have the building debris, in which we discovered a few Vijayanagara copper coins.
Was the period of Alamelama's legend and Talakad's predicament just a coincidence? Our curiosity was beginning to grow. We were eager to see for ourselves the second victim of Alamelama's curse, Malingi.
ಮಾಲಂಗಿ ಮಡುವಾಗಲಿ.
We had to take a circuitous route to Malingi, which lies on the southern bank of the river Kaveri. It is said that Alamelama had drowned herself here, cursing that someday the village would become a swirling whirlpool. Looking at the erosion caused by the river at Malingi, it is obvious that people would never have chosen to live so dangerously close to the river. The river has moved closer to them, and it seems that the Kaveri will eventually drag Malingi into its churning waters. We discovered some interesting historical facts that gave us an indication of when the Kaveri might have become a threat to Malingi. 15th and 16th century inscriptions refer to two towns, Malingi and Chikka Chikka meaning small. By the beginning of the 19th century, there is reference to Hosa Malingi, meaning New Malingi, and Tadi Malingi, meaning Malingi on the banks of the river. It was perhaps the movement of the river between the 16th and 18th centuries that submerged Chikka Malingi. The water level being low, we noticed a Veera Kallu, a stone slab laid to honour a dead soldier, lying in the riverbed. This would not have been placed in the path of the river. Could this be a remnant of Chikka Malingi? It seemed to us that as the river moved, Malingi became Tadi Malingi, Malingi on the banks of the river. With the growing threat of the river's movement, some people might have moved to a new Malingi, Hosa Malingi. All this happened between the 16th and 18th centuries. Alamelama has, without a doubt, left us with something to think about. The events at Talakad and Malingi happened uncannily close to the time of her curse. Would the third stanza of Alamelama's curse also reveal its vindictive consequences?
ಮೈಸೂರು ದೊರೆಗಳು ಮಕ್ಕಳಿಲ್ಲದೆ ಹೋಗಲಿ.
In the pages of Indian history, the Wadiyar dynasty is perhaps the only one that almost continuously remained in power for more than 6 centuries, spanning across medieval and modern times. The Wadiyars built, expanded, and consolidated their territory of Mysore from a small principality to a mighty and prosperous kingdom. Wadiyar rule ended with India's independence from the British in 1947. Before Alamelama's curse in 1610, the Wadiyar genealogy was almost unbroken. Succession was direct, from father to sons. Within just a few years after the curse, though, something ominous happened. Raja Wadiyar lost 3 of his 4 sons. After these mysterious and coincidental deaths, the grief-stricken Raja Wadiyar retired to the comfort of Lord Vishnu in Melkote. Raja Wadiyar died in 1617, 7 years after he had taken over Srirangapatnam. Succeeding his throne was Chamaraja V, Raja Wadiyar's grandson. But Chamaraja did not have a son to succeed him. Instead, he was succeeded by Raja Wadiyar's only surviving son, Imadi Raja. But after just 1 year in office, he was assassinated. With the death of Imadi, Raja Wadiyar's immediate bloodline ceased. From here, over the next 100 years, a broken sequence of succession in the Wadiyar dynasty followed. though it continued to remain in the line of direct descent, succession passing to Rajawudya's nephews and their children. Imadi Raja was succeeded by his cousin, Kantirava Narasaraja Wudya. Inscriptions mention that Kantirava had 183 wives, but only one son. Before the child reached the age of 6, it died. Kempadeva Raja succeeded the throne upon the death of his cousin. Under his reign, the Wodyas threw off allegiance to the Vijayanagar Empire and established an independent kingdom. But Kempadeva Raja, following in the unfortunate footsteps of his ancestors, also failed to have sons, leaving his nephew, Chikkadeva Raja, to take over. For the next 3 generations, succession passed from father to son, the only exception to an otherwise broken Wodya genealogy. But even here there was something strange. Kantirava Narasaraja II, son of Chikkadeva Raja, was deaf and mute. Kantirava bore one son, Krishna Raja I. With the death of Krishna Raja in 1732, the line of direct descent of the Wodya dynasty ceased. His only son had died at an age of just 6 months. From here, there is something quite unusual in the Wodya genealogy. The king had a son to succeed him, but this son would have to adopt an heir, who would then have a natural son. This sequence has repeated itself for the last 300 years. What is even more strange was that there were never any successors from the line of direct descent. Almost all the adoptions had to be from outside the immediate family. When Krishna Raja I died in 1732, he had to be succeeded by an adopted heir, Chamaraja VI. Chamaraja VI was soon deposed and imprisoned at the notorious hill prison, Kabul-Durga. It is said that no person returned to tell the horrors of Kabul-Durga. Another adopted heir, Krishna Raja II, replaced Chamaraja. The 2 sons of Krishna Raja II, Nanjaraja and Bettada Chamaraja VII, were both assassinated while in power. With no immediate heirs left, Kasa Chamaraja, an adopted child, was installed on the throne. A small memorial to honour this king still stands just outside Srirangapatnam. Kasa Chamaraja was succeeded by his son, Mummadi Krishnaraja Wodya. But that strange pattern would once again extend its shadow. Mummadi Krishnaraja left behind no natural heir to succeed him. An adopted son, Chamaraja IX, was installed on the throne. Chamaraja Wodya IX had 2 sons. His successor, Krishnaraja IV, had no sons. He was succeeded by his nephew, Jaya Chamaraja. Jaya Chamaraja Wodya had a son, Srikanta Datta Narasimha Raja. And once again, the present Wodya has no natural successor to date. Without a doubt, the Wodya genealogy reveals a mysterious pattern that is beyond rational explanations. Not only did most of the kings fail to beget sons, but even more important was the fact that they reverted to adoptions from outside the immediate family. People believe that it is the lack of continuous succession within the family that is the essence of the 3rd stanza of the curse, and this has come true. As a local resident put it,
ಇವತ್ತಿನ ತನಕ ಮೈಸೂರು ಅಷ್ಟೇ ಮಕ್ಕಳಾಗಿಲ್ಲ, ಆ ಫ್ಯಾಮಿಲಿಗೆ ಮಕ್ಕಳಿಲ್ಲ.
At this stage, it was difficult for us to reject the curse as simply another story of coincidences. At the same time, we could not say that the curse was actually the cause of these events, the Woodyears' predicament and the phenomena at Talakad and Malingi. Could the curse have been constructed after these events? Our thinking was interrupted by a most unexpected discovery. Alamelama is not a figment of people's imagination. At Srirangapatnam, the city from where her husband once ruled his kingdom, are idols of Alamelama.
ದೇವಸ್ಥಾನದಲ್ಲಿ ಆ ದೇವರ ಮೇಲೆ ಬಹಳ ಭಕ್ತಿ ಶ್ರದ್ಧೆ ಇರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ರಾಜರುಗಳು ಅವರ ಭಕ್ತಿ ವಿಗ್ರಹನ ದೇವರ ಸನ್ನಿಧಿ ಒಳಗೆ ಯಾವಾಗಲೂ ಇರಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋದಕ್ಕೋಸ್ಕರ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಅದೇ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಶ್ರೀರಂಗರಾಯ ಆಲಮೇಲವನ್ನು ಭಕ್ತಿ ವಿಗ್ರಹ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ.
And then the temple priests showed us something else, quite unknown to most people. The nose ring.
ಆಗ ಎಲ್ಲ ಎತ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹೋಗ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಈ ಮುತ್ತೊಂದು ಮಾತ್ರ ಉಳ್ಕೊಂಡಿದೆ. ಈ ಮುತ್ತೊಂದು ಉಳ್ಕೊಂಡಿದೆ.
The nose ring that adorns the goddess in the temple handed over by Alamelama to Raja Woodyear's soldiers before her death. Proof indeed of the incident at Malingi. There was more evidence of Alamelama at Mysore. It is said in the annals of the Mysore palace, a record of Woodyear history, that Alamelama visited Raja Woodyear in his sleep soon after her death. He was so remorseful that he offered prayers to her. But this could have become more than a mere regret. When Raja Woodyear's 3 sons died in quick succession after 1610 AD, Alamelama was then appeased. And, in fact, this practice continues even to this day. During Dasera, an annual festival, Alamelama is venerated with the family goddess by the Woodyears in a private and rather surreptitious ceremony. We were convinced that the incident at Malingi may well have happened in 1610 AD. In India, myth and legends are more than mere stories. They are the very source of faith. Legends abound in every village, every temple, everywhere. But to us, Alamelama's legend was extraordinary. It is unique in its conception, linking 2 natural phenomena to a genealogical part that was predictive. It teases our sense of rationality. By themselves, scientific explanations for the natural events at Talakad and Malingi are inadequate. The period of these events coincides too closely with the time of the curse. And any scientific explanation must give a logical explanation for the broken Woodyear genealogy, simultaneously. All this with evidence that Alamelama might have actually existed, and the event at Malingi between Alamelama and Raja Woodyear might actually have taken place. How could we find reason in this maze of history? Find a record of the verse circa 1600 AD, then this was no legend, it was history. Of course, we did not expect to find an inscription with the verse on it, but even a reference to the legend would be enough. We looked for the earliest record or reference to the three-stanza verse as we know it. To our surprise, no local records, not even folk tales or folk songs, make mention of the legend. And no evidence of the curse or Alamelama exists at Talakad or Malingi, except what an archaeologist reported almost 100 years ago. He was told that opposite the Virabhadra temple at Talakad there is a mantapa, a covered veranda. This is the spot where Alamelama was supposedly cremated. This is mentioned in a record of local history, preserved in a monastery in Koppala. We found only the deserted remains of the monastery. The monastery had moved to Talakad, but people were unaware of any association of the mantapa with Alamelama. Unable to trace any local reference to the curse, we began looking through British records. A breakthrough came in the shape of a work by Francis Buchanan, a British doctor, who was deputed by the British East India Company in 1800 AD to make a journey through southern India. Luck favoured us. During his long journey, Buchanan had stopped at Malingi. From here, he provides us with what may be the earliest explicit account of the situation at Talakad. He reported that he could see vast stretches of sandhills across the riverbank, and noted that only the tops of some temples at Talakad were visible. Buchanan then goes on to mention something else, something startling, that people believe Talakad is sand because of a curse. He wrote, "The natives attribute it to the prayers of a woman who drowned while crossing the river, and who, while dying, wished that it might be overwhelmed by sand. This is not the curse we know of." Could Buchanan not even have heard a mention of Alamelama? He makes a remark as if he knew that he must clear any doubts we may have 200 years later. Concerning its governors, before it became subject to the Rajas of Mysore, no tradition is current. We searched through other records that could support Buchanan's story. Lieutenant Colonel Mark Wilkes, political resident at the court of Mysore, makes no mention of the curse in his book, written at about the same time as Buchanan's journey. But a government report of 1895 was more definitive. It made clear that no authentic statement of Alamelama's curse is recorded during Raja Wujya's time, and there is no mention of this curse till the end of the 18th century. All this pointed out to a simple fact, that up to 1800, Alamelama's three-stanza verse did not exist. The legendary verse had taken root later, after 1800. But when? After sifting through several government records, we found mention of a traditionary curse in a state gazette, followed by what we think is the first explicit mention of it, in B.L. Rice's 1876 Gazetteer. He calls it the Curse of Talakad. We highlighted a possible interval when the legend could have taken root, after Buchanan's journey of 1800 and before Rice's Gazetteer of 1876. But why this period? Something important must have happened. Talakad was not entirely buried under sand in 1600 AD. Archaeological findings and historical records tell us that the process may have begun in 1600 AD, but continued for more than 250 years. The ancient city might have faced its ultimate end only in the 19th century. To scientists, sand beaches on the inner bank of a meandering river are a common occurrence. At Talakad, the process began with the construction of the Madhav Mantri Dam. The dam, built around 1350 AD, across the river Kaveri, just a few kilometers upstream from Talakad, created lower water stages downstream, exposed river deposits, forced a change in the river's course, and created sand exposure on the Talakad bank of the river. With availability of water for irrigation, large-scale deforestation soon followed to make way for agricultural activities. With the tree cover destroyed, there was no barrier to the raging southwest monsoon winds, which began to carry sand from the riverbank. The only obstacles to these sandy winds were the towering temple structures at Talakad. Obstacles that in fact abetted the accumulation of sand over the city. Another scientific explanation for the phenomenon was given to us by Professor Krishnamurti.
Probably it is due to the occurrence of little ice age during the late medieval period. Good amount of water deposits in the form of ice in the polar and its adjacent regions, and this results in dry spell, receding in the water level of the sea, and also less rainfall in the tropical regions. Deposition of sand in the form of dunes is not only found in Talakad but also in its adjacent regions. For example, just 7 kilometers upstream Talakad, on the northern banks of river Kaveri, there is one site called Krishnapura. We excavated that site in 1998, and there also we got a huge stretch of sand rising to a height of 1 meter in the section of the trench.
It is quite possible that climate changes in the 17th century triggered off sand dune formation over Talakad and other places on the banks of the river Kaveri. But this was only the beginning of a long process of sand accumulation over Talakad. We discovered some interesting facts to support this. The Anandaswara temple was built towards the end of the 17th century in the southwest corner of the sand dunes at Talakad. An inscription dated 1718 AD mentions that a member of the Wudiyar family gifted a chariot to the Kirtinarayana temple. Then, in 1760, the Gauri Shankara temple was built. Why did people donate chariots and build temples in a city covered by sand or facing imminent danger from sand? Obviously, the impact of the sand had not reached alarming proportions. So when did it actually happen? The 1895 government report gave us a possible answer. It was only around 1830 that the sand had advanced to such an extent that the villagers were forced to move further inland. Until then, the sand was confined to the riverbanks. It was only after severe deforestation that the sand advanced rapidly over Talakad. This was a significant occurrence at Talakad in the early part of the 19th century. And interestingly, it fitted the interval we had expected, 1800 to 1876. The onslaught became such a threat that from the early 1870s the government made a concerted effort at restoring tree cover over Talakad. By the early 20th century, the advance of sand dunes was controlled, though it never ceased. And what about Malingi? Geologists tell us that Malingi and Talakad are two sides of the same coin. It is a common phenomenon to find sand beaches forming on the inner bank and erosion taking place on the outer bank of a meandering river. Malingi being situated close to the outer bank of the Kaveri, there is nothing surprising about the erosion here. Strong currents are often seen here when the water levels are high, and this is because of the peculiar topography that has emerged from the erosion taking place along the bank of the river. Especially the rocky ledge, which protrudes into the river's path. With no further clues at Malingi, we turned to the history of the wood years around the 19th century. After the assassination of Bettada Chamaraja VII in 1776, an adopted child, Kasa Chamaraja, was nominated and installed on the throne by the army commander Hyder Ali. Kasa Chamaraja continued as king, but all powers were vested with Hyder Ali and later his son, Tipu. Kasa Chamaraja died in 1796, leaving behind his infant son as successor, Mumadi Krishnaraja Wodya. But the infant was not nominated to the throne by Tipu. The Wodyas were ousted from power for the first time in their history. But this was not because of the failure to beget a son, for Krishnaraja was the natural and legitimate heir to the throne. The infant Krishnaraja's mother sought the help of the British East India Company to get back their kingdom. An epic battle, called the Fourth War of Mysore, was fought at Srirangapatnam. Tipu was defeated and killed in battle. With this, the city of Srirangapatnam saw an end to its long and tumultuous history. The Wodyas left a city that they had all but already lost. Under a treaty with the British East India Company, the infant Mumadi Krishnaraja Wodya was installed on the throne in 1799. The Ganda Barunda, the two-headed eagle insignia of the Wodyas, once again prevailed, from the city of Mysore. In the early years of Mumadi Krishnaraja's reign, Mysore drifted into social and political disorder. His administrators enforced brutal taxes on his people, who were reeling under severe drought and famine. Unable to endure their misery any longer, an armed insurgency of the peasantry began in 1831 and spread rapidly throughout the kingdom. The king failed to contain the growing disorder. Their interests at stake, the East India Company intervened and subdued the uprising. Mysore receded into further gloom in 1848. Lord Dalhousie, the then Governor-General of the East India Company, forced into effect the doctrine of lapse, whereby if the ruler of a protected state died without a natural or legally appointed heir, his country would lapse to the company. The kingdoms of Oudh, Jhansi, Nagpur and Satara had fallen victim to the doctrine of lapse. Mysore's fate remained uncertain. In 1856, Lord Dalhousie declared, "The Raja of Mysore is now 62 years of age. He has no legitimate son or grandson, nor any lawful male heir whatever. He has adopted no child. The territory of Mysore will then have lapsed to the British government." Never before in their 450-year history had the failure to beget a son threatened to end the Wodeyar dynasty. We came across two events of significant importance in the 19th century history of Mysore: the 1831 peasant revolt and the doctrine of lapse, both within our time interval, 1800 to 1876. From our findings, we looked for an explanation to the mystery of the Curse of Talakad. Could the verse be a construct? If so, how was it constructed? Why was it constructed in this way? And when did it take root? The verse could have been constructed from two independent legends: the Wodeyar's fear of Alamelama after the incident at Malingi in 1610 AD, and the legend that Buchanan records during his journey in 1800. A woman drowned while crossing the river from Malingi cursed that Talakad be overwhelmed by sand. When the renewed onslaught of sand occurred in the 19th century, a new dimension might have been given to the old legend, with the replacement of the woman by Alamelama. Malingi then provided the common point between the first and third stanzas of the curse, Talakad and the Wodeyars. And when could it have taken root? During the 1831 peasant revolt? In a traditional society, and to a great extent in all societies, rumours and legends were, and are often, used to mobilise people and opinion against an opponent. The legend portrays the Wodeyars as a cursed dynasty, with its end imminent. The prevailing discontent would have been an ideal time for the curse to take root amongst the people. By some quirk of fate, the legend served the designs of the British under the doctrine of lapse. The relevance of the curse to this period is justified by the fact that, once an adopted successor to Mummadi Krishna Raja was installed on the throne, Rice's Revised Gazetteer of 1897 mentions that the third stanza of the curse was of no effect. But why this construct? For the very reason it fascinated us. Combining two natural phenomena to a genealogical part makes the curse profound. It is almost impossible to link the sand at Talakad and whirlpools at Malingi with the genealogy of the Wodeyars. The legend was a dramatic construct, basing itself on a real incident that might have taken place at Malingi, in which the Wodeyars had played a part, and a perfect inclusion of an older legend that had explained the sand dunes at Talakad. We had found reason. Almost. If the incident at Malingi had indeed happened, then what about the genealogy of the Wodeyar rulers? Had Alamelama cursed Raja Wodeyar that his dynasty would fail to beget sons? Did his sons die because of her curse? Did the line of direct descent in the Wudya dynasty end because of Alamelama? And why that strange pattern in Wudya adoptions? Are all these events just a mere coincidence? As long as the strange pattern in the Wudya genealogy continues, we can only remain skeptical of any rational explanations. We must wait for the truth. Only time will tell of what happened 400 years ago. Can you hear the whispers?